Hello, welcome to the first content-based video in accessing AS Biology. In this video we're going to go through Unit 1 of AS Biology based on the AQA scheme, but obviously applicable to others if you're watching from a different school. This is essentially what we want you to know before you show up. Now, especially this year where you've been out of the classroom for maybe 6 months or so, but anyway, in general, there's an amount of GCSE biology that really does help you access the AS spec, and I'm going to take you through in these 4 videos which bits of the GCSE syllabus you should go and revise to help you know what's going on when you turn up on day 1 in year 12. Okay, so first thing to point out is this handy page here on the AQA website, which is called the GCSE to A-level progression page, right, which has got basically links between the GCSE specification and the AS level specification. You can basically line them up and see where they overlap. So it's a very useful page that you can find. Obviously, the other boards will provide their own versions, but we use AQA. Okay, so in this, right, we're going to talk about these 4 areas: molecules, enzymes, DNA, and chemistry, because Unit 1 is quite a chemistry-heavy unit, okay, and requires you to know a fair bit of your GCSE chemistry and the biochemistry bits of your GCSE, even if you didn't call them that. The big purpose of this and the big advantage of this, especially if you've been out of the classroom for so long, is so that you don't turn up and be this guy, okay? Please don't be this guy. So we often start with our year 12 classes and we start talking about something that's fairly ordinary, and you start to see everybody's faces become like this. They sort of just stare at you, and the mouths go slightly open, and it's really draining, right? If you've got 17, 18 people, you're talking about something fairly straightforward, and you've got 17, 18 faces in front of you all doing that, it starts to feel like the walls are closing in. It starts to feel like your energy is being drained as you're looking into these vacant eyes. So don't be that guy, okay? Ask a question, say you don't know, point out where the issue is. That way we can fix it. Don't just sit and stare. But hopefully if you go away and revise the things I'm about to tell you to revise, then you won't have that problem. Right, let's dive straight into it then. So these are the biological molecules we're going to teach you at AS level biology. Okay, you've got here a basic amino acid. You've got here 2 versions of glucose, alpha and beta glucose. You've got the 2 molecules here that make up our nucleic acids. So deoxyribose, famed in DNA, and ribose nucleic acid, famed in RNA. You've also got another version of those from the same family, which is ATP. Okay, you can see the 3 phosphates on the end there. Down here we've got the fats, the sort of the lipid family. Okay, so here we've got glycerol and 3 fatty acid molecules stitching together to make with these so-called ester bonds to make a triglyceride. And here finally we've got a thing called a phospholipid, where we've got fatty acid tails, we've got glycerols, and we've got phosphate. Now you might be thinking, I've studied nothing like that at GCSE. What at GCSE could possibly prepare me for all this chemistry? But don't worry about that, okay? We can teach you the chemistry, we teach you these individual structures. There are bits of the GCSE that will make, if you remember them, that will make it easier to access this. So what we're going to teach you about these molecules is all of their structures, their functions, where you find them in biology, where you find them in nature, right, what their purpose is, what their function is, and how they go together to form the macromolecules, the chemistry of how those bonds are built up, the chemistry of how those bonds are broken down, and so on and so forth. Okay, so where should you start if you want to revise what you need to know to access this? Well, it would be really helpful if you came in remembering your basic food groups. Okay, so this is really basic. You've done it in year 8. Maybe you've even done something like this in primary school, where you've learned the composition, function, and the sources of your carbohydrates, your fats, and your proteins. Okay, what they are, what they're for, what kind of foods come in them, and so on and so forth. Okay, pretty basic stuff. Really helpful if you remember that. The food tests, really helpful if you remember those as well. You might remember you would have done a required practical at GCSE where you tested for protein, you tested for starch, you tested for sugar, and you tested for fats. Okay, with the Biorect test, which is down here, which of course went lilac when it touched protein. You got the iodine test here, which went dark black when it touched starch. You got the Benedict's test here, which is kind of semi-quantitative in that the more sugar there is, the darker a reddy colour it goes. And there were various tests for fats that you might have done as well. Okay, so it'd be really helpful if you can remember those things. Now bear in mind the purpose of these videos is not for me to teach you this material, it's just to tell you what you need to revise. So if you need to go and revise those, go away and do so. We would also like you to remember enzymes. Okay, you will be expected to remember your GCSE knowledge of enzymes. So their structure, their function, basically what they are, what they do, so which enzyme breaks what down into what. So GCSE, you will have learnt things like amylase breaks starch down into glucose, lipase breaks fats down into fatty acids and glycerol. Remembering those things would be really useful as per this table just here. Okay, these terms here, lock and key theory, okay, what that is, what it means to denature an enzyme and the conditions in which that happens and the conditions they work best in, and some names of enzymes. You really will only have come across these ones, amylase, protease, lipase, as the core 3 families of enzymes that you had to know at GCSE. So remembering this kind of shape here, the substrate, the enzyme, the active site, all that kind of stuff would be really helpful if you remembered it from GCSE. Okay, we'd also require you to know a little bit about DNA. Now, really not much on this because there isn't much in the GCSE. Okay, pretty much your bit on DNA is that it exists. Okay, that DNA exists. You may remember you got exposed to the idea of the bases. There are 4 of them. It's a genetic code made of 4 molecules, A, C, T, and G. It's a double helix shape, and that you've got a nucleotide which is made of a phosphate group, a sugar, and one of these bases. But there's not a lot to know from GCSE about DNA other than it exists and a bit on the old double helix structure. Okay, and that's really all we need to go away and revise on that. It's a very short bit of the GCSE. And then, of course, from another subject, you will have been told this at your open evenings and so on and so forth, that if you're doing AS biology, you can't forget your chemistry. You can't forget your English, and you can't forget your maths, and you can't forget your physics either. Sorry, it's a science subject. It requires those other science subjects and the ability to communicate them. Okay, so from the GCSE chemistry, we would require you to remember covalent bonding and ionic bonding. What are they? Right, what's happening? Now, you don't need to have done AS and A-level chemistry to do AS and A-level biology. You can explain all of the chemistry that you need to explain at A-level biology using GCSE chemistry techniques. Electron shells, shared electrons, swapping electrons, all that kind of stuff. If you are doing AS chemistry, then let me warn you that all the chemistry you've learned up to this point is a lie. The chemists have lied to you. Electron shells? No, that's not really a thing, right? That's like trying to explain a car using a Tony Early Learning Centre My First Car model. Okay, electron shells are fine. They explain a lot of the behaviour of atoms. But if you are a chemist and you're getting a bit more sophisticated, you're going to learn about a thing called orbitals and orbital theory and all that kind of stuff, overlapping and hybrid orbitals and things like that. Either model is fine for explaining AS level biology, the chemistry in AS level biology, but you do need to remember what is a covalent bond, what is an ionic bond. We're going to add some bonds, things like hydrogen bonds, van der Waals interactions, so on and so forth. If you remember what exothermic and endothermic mean, that would be really useful because there's a lot of building bonds and breaking bonds in this molecule. And it would be really helpful if you knew the number of bonds that the typical biological atoms form. So carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen make up most of life on Earth, most of biology. So if you know that carbon has 4 bonds, can form 4 bonds, hydrogen 1, oxygen 2, and nitrogen 3, that's really, really useful. And then basically how to draw molecules, in terms of stick diagrams. And as you can see up there, there's some electron shell stuff. You won't really be asked to draw that in A-level biology, but it's a useful starting point to know what you're doing. Okay, so there we have it. If you don't remember any of those things or you're a bit shaky on them, go away and revise them. Next up is Unit 2, which is the unit on cells. See you then.